back in the day, Pokemon and 4Kids were a great combination.
These donuts are great. Jelly-filled are my favorite. Nothing beats a jelly-filled donut.
While Pokemon wasn't the first anime 4Kids dubbed, it's definitely the most important in really putting them on the map. Hitting the States in 1998, this version of the series struck a chord with many kids and became one of their flagship dubs, along with Yu-Gi-Oh! Later. However, as you may know, 4Kids wasn't exactly known for their accurate translations.
I'll use my trusty frying pan as a drying pan.
As their name may imply, they became rather infamous for taking either risque moments in anime, or even just scenes that reference anything in Japanese culture, and editing them down to be appropriate for our friend, Little Timmy and his apple pies. While this became more apparent in their later dubs like One Piece, this style of editing started to become well known here. So like with Total Drama Island, we're going to be going through some of their most egregious and weirdest edits and censors. Some of these can get really wild and extremely weird, so buckle up! So to start off, we got...
Jelly-filled are my favorite.
Everyone knows this one. It's the one people point to when pointing out how far 4Kids went with Americanizing anime. But what's funny is that these rice balls, or onigiri, is that 4Kids was never even consistent with what they were called. Let me just go in order. In Pokemon Paparazzi, they actually got their name correct.
These rice balls are pretty good.
I'm kinda shocked given that this was only in the first season, but hey, maybe they realized the first instance was stupid and would just call them that for the rest of the series.
Here you go, Snubble. Popcorn balls.
But
Nah, of course not. In Stubble Snobbery, Brock refers to them as, well, popcorn balls. And those do not resemble rice balls either. They've also been referred to, as shown in the Totodile duel,
Have one of these delicious but non-nutritious snack treats. No thanks, I ain't hungry.
Okay, I'm guessing you're trying to keep it more vague, which I can understand. And jumping into Hoenn in the episode You Never Can Talo, Brock makes this remark.
There were 4 sandwiches in my backpack!
Which doesn't seem too far-fetched at first, but then later in the episode, Team Rocket is shown stealing said sandwiches. It'd be funny to take on the Herculean task of binging the entire anime and then constantly running into this inconsistency. Now, to be fair, a lot of these examples happen pretty far apart, so you can only really notice if you're paying enough attention. Or maybe the ingredients for stuff is just that weird in the Pokemon world.
oh yeah, super hyped for Brock's famous rice balls. Wonder where he's getting the ingredients from this time. Dunkin' Donuts? Jimmy John's? The local movie theater? Wherever it is though. This video is not sponsored by any of them.
But that's not the only food-related edit they made. Frequently, the same rice balls would be replaced with more American food, or at least more worldwide food. This happens often enough that there are compilations of these like this one here. A lot of these are just hilarious for all the wrong reasons. We got this giant rice ball rolling down a hill being changed to a giant sandwich, another rice ball being changed to a PB&J sandwich, and my favorite, a plate with a rice ball being replaced with a singular cracker. Just one cracker, right there, fresh and ready to eat. A true 5-course meal. In the second episode, we got the scene of Professor Oak clearly heating up ramen, and they decide instead of him dining on that, to instead say he ordered pizza.
You must have been mistaken. Ah, there's my pizza. Coming!
What's extra funny is they added in that doorbell sound. But Japanese food wasn't the only thing that got Americanized. One less talked about area in the subject is the more blatant American locations being referenced. For the first Pokemon movie, Ash makes this remark.
I didn't know Vikings still existed.
They mostly live in Minnesota.
In the original Japanese, Ash and Brock sort of just talk about how lucky they were for the boat to get them, but 4Kids had to just turn this into a reference to some of the biggest chokers in the NFL. Some of the European dubs of it actually make a lot of their own cultural references, so it's funny how in some way, this unites us as a planet. There's also this even funnier one in the ancient puzzle of Pokemopolis. So in this scene of these characters trapped in the void of a giant Gengar, this makes more sense in context, James, rather than making a comment about how this professor is reacting to the situation like he did in the original, says,
I'd rather be in Miami Beach.
This is legit spit-take worthy. Miami Beach is canon to the Pokemon world. You know, I guess the Vikings comment means the NFL is canon to the Pokemon world. Would that mean Unova has the equivalent to the New York teams? I'm sure you're probably thinking of the other big US location they referenced in the dub. You know, the one they based an entire emotional episode on.
Pokemon in Love in Hollywood, California.
Yeah, that. Believe it or not, it's actually called Hollywood in the original. The California part was added in the dub, though. Now I want to see what a Californian-based Pokemon region would look like. But back to the straightforward censorship. Did you know that in this show, literally about magical creatures fighting, they actually censored violence? No, not in the battles, but a character slapping someone. In the very first episode, Misty, when wondering if Pikachu's hurt, slaps Ash across the face.
Okay. Not you!
But in the dub, they make the most awkward cut.
I'm okay. Not you! Look what you've done to that poor little thing!
It's such a weird line to draw within the show. So animals can be blasted and beamed, and actual humans, including children, can be electrocuted, hit with poison gas, and burned, but a kid slapping another kid is where standards draw the line? Maybe slapping someone is just that powerful.
And now for my ultimate attack!
Be ready, Pikachu! Her Arbok's bite could be full of deadly poison.
Arbok, please! I'm just gonna slap you!
I'm telling standards!
Also, the editing on this is bad. The slap sound effect was left in. But that's not the only cut instance of violence. We also get this one in the School of Hard Knocks. You may remember this early example of fourth wall breaking in the show.
Now, come on, we're already late. We've got to start the show.
Corny, yeah? Well, in the original version, Brock basically closes out the episode, and then we get this beautiful shot of Misty knocking him over the head with a log. Apparently, this level of over-the-top slapstick isn't allowed for Timmy. It makes his apple pie soggy. Back on the topic of editing, in classic 4Kids fashion, a lot of the kanji was edited out. Now, I get it, they wanted to add in text to be more readable to an English-speaking audience. It does make it strange how later on in Sonic X, they just add in gibberish text, but I digress. However, because it was the late 90s and editing technology was far more limited, a lot of this looked way more blatantly obvious. Visual gags with said text will just be removed, like in episode 3 here. That's not too noticeable upon viewing, but then you get this here in Haunter vs. Kadabra. I feel like I remember using text like that in clip art in elementary school. It's so hilarious how obvious that was just added on. I remember noticing this even as a kid. Another favorite of mine is in Path to the Pokemon League, with the text on AJ's gym here. The color of it mixed with how it's laid out makes this look like such a rush job. Like, if I was on a Pokemon journey and I ran into this, I would not take his operation seriously. There are several instances of these, usually to varying degrees of obviousness, but in their defense, it's much harder to edit over cell animation than with digital, so it was hard back then to make this look good. And yes, for the 5 people who asked, this does include replacing the text on bottles with images very poorly. Now we must make the truly natural segue into talking about dirty jokes. Yes, despite Pokemon being considered a kids anime even in Japan, there are still quite a few of these. So basically, we're getting out of the weird territory as this video was titled, and into the kind of edits. Obviously, there's going to be less noticeable in terms of changing compared to what I covered on Total Drama, but man, some of these got wild. I'm going to be using a few examples to really showcase this, but there's a lot more that I can cover in another video. The first one I want to point out is less of a dirty joke and more of a safety first, kids. It's no way out. Team Rocket is in an igloo during a blizzard, and the match that Meowth is using to light the igloo is replaced with a candle. Remember, kids, safety first, because one way of holding fire is superior to the other. The next one comes in the Kangaskhan Kid, an episode well known for having this scene.
Here, take a closer look.
Papa, be careful!
Don't worry, my dear. Don't worry about him.
But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about this moment.
You people are Pokemon.
I'm a person, you creep!
Random remark, sure, but here's what it said originally. Legit the most out-of-pocket thing to say here, wild boy. It does make Misty's reaction here make a little more sense. The other one comes from probably the most edited episode mentioned here today, Beauty and the Beach. Now, I'll say this right now since I know this will be brought up, I won't be mentioning the banned episodes. Now, these never aired here in the States and thus didn't have bizarre edits, and their material could frankly make for its own video. I will be mentioning this one because it did eventually get a dubbed, airing as a lost episode. A lot more of it had to be altered. Heck, we got an edit here that's basically bad in both versions. So in Japanese, this old guy who our heroes run into makes this remark at Misty.
8年後が楽しみじゃ。
If you thought that was creepy, wait till you hear what they changed it to.
You remind me of my granddaughter.
TMI, dude. I hope your granddaughter has that restraining order in place. But that's not the big thing. This still made it in. Nah, what you're waiting for me to talk about is this. It kind of speaks for itself why they were weary about even airing this one. Heck, it apparently only aired here twice. There's also an instance where they make comments about Misty's chest size. Yeah, a lot of these were just cut out of the episode when it aired here. Heck, you can't even find this episode on home media releases here. Meaning the Pokemon Company and 4Kids basically wanted to bury this one. Now, if you don't know, jokes like these are more common in anime. Heck, the pervy old guy was a super common trope in these back then. Ray's grandpa in Sailor Moon comes to mind. However, anime wasn't as commonly known back then as it is now, so I imagine the standards back then were going, what the fuck? At some of this stuff. Heck, these sort of gags in anime are still being debated to this day as the medium has gone more mainstream. I don't really feel like having a stance on this at the moment, just know that I can at least see why they'd be a little freaked out at these, even at the time when putting this into context. Phew, that's a lot of the big ones. Surely we didn't miss any elephants in the room, little Chico. Chica! The Jynx in the room? Okay, this is another banned episode, quote-unquote, but it does have a dub, so I'm including it. So this is Jynx. And this is what Jynx initially looked like when its debut episode, Holiday Hijinks, came out. When hitting the States, the design received heavy criticism from Carol Boston Weatherford, an author and critic among other things, who criticized its design for having features that can be taken as negative stereotypes of African Americans. Which, looking at Jynx's design, despite knowing that that wasn't the intention, I can at least see how one could interpret it that way. Now, I'm not going to go too in-depth with my thoughts here, just know that I personally prefer the purple design they changed it to for no other reason than it has better synergy with Smoochum. But in terms of editing, a check of early episodes that featured said original design were either taken out of circulation or banned entirely. This includes a whole episode of Johto featuring it until the purple design became the standard in Gen 3. Re-airings of these early episodes were later changed to the new purple design when they re-aired years later. But these are just some of the wild edits this series had. There was a lot more, and maybe we'll pick this up again. I just didn't want to cover every little thing since we'd be here for hours if that were the case. And maybe we'll cover some of those banned episodes, cause man, I got through this whole video without even mentioning Porygon. Well, until now.